Welcome to English Plus Podcast, the English we speak, and much more. Learn English, expand your knowledge, and enjoy through our vocabulary builder, novel, grammar, series, word power, poetry, and literature episodes. All our episodes come with full transcripts, quizzes, downloadable worksheets, and more exclusive content you get only by listening to English Plus Podcast. Support English Plus Podcast by becoming a patron of the show on Patreon. Use the link in the description and become a patron of English Plus Podcast. There are many benefits to becoming a patron of our show, so what are you waiting for? Click the link and check them out on my Patreon page. But above all, support English Plus Podcast and help our free e-learning journey continue. In this series, we will look at some of literature's most compelling heroes and legends. Characters as diverse as Beowulf and Elizabeth Bennet, to try and understand what it is about them that captures our imagination. Why did the adventures of Odysseus enthrall the ancient Greeks, and why have they continued to captivate readers even to the present day? What made Sherlock Holmes a celebrity in Victorian England, and why does he continue to be a bankable hero in 21st century Hollywood? In this hero series, we'll meet many heroes, heroines, and villains that will help us answer these questions. We will start the very first episode of this series with Frodo Baggins, the main protagonist of J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. We will start talking about a pivotal moment for Frodo and Sam. Now, a pivotal moment in The Lord of the Rings comes near the end of the second volume of the trilogy, when Frodo Baggins and his companion Sam have gone off on their own to try to carry out their mission. That mission is to get to the heart of Mordor, the land of the Dark Lord, and there to throw the ring of power into the fires of Mount Doom. This is the only way to destroy it and thus break Sauron's power forever. The two companions know they're facing thousands of goblins and trolls and the Dark Lord himself. And there's another threat they don't know about, Shelob, the giant spider who guards the secret entrance to Mordor. Even if they get past her and through all the Dark Lord's inner defenses, even if they manage to destroy the ring, they don't have a clue or even the beginning of a plan for how to get back. It is a suicide mission. Frodo and Sam pause to rest and begin to talk about legends and old adventures. Sam remarks that the two are in a legend now and speculates that one day someone might write a book about them, making Frodo the famousest of the hobbits. In response, Frodo laughs, believing that the idea of himself as a hero in a book is genuinely funny. Nothing like laughter has been heard in the ruined land on the outskirts of Mordor for thousands of years. In such a place, Frodo's laughter is a kind of exorcism. It dispels the gloom and defeatism that are among the chief weapons of the Dark Lord. Shortly afterwards, Sam and Frodo go to sleep, with their minds at rest. It is an undramatic moment, but it sheds light on the question of what makes some characters unforgettable and some stories, such as The Lord of the Rings, so successful. Nothing has the same charm as the completely unexpected, unless it's the unexpected that we've been unknowingly waiting for. So here we move on to the idea of the unexpected heroes. And maybe, as we're going to see, this is part of the huge success of The Lord of the Rings in the first place and the character which we're focusing on today, Bilbo Baggins. There are likely many secrets to the unparalleled success of Tolkien's work, but among them must be the hobbits Bilbo and Frodo. Can hobbits, who are small, decidedly unwarlike creatures without any recognizable strength or courage be heroes? Although they are certainly unexpected heroes, they seem to be the kind of heroes that readers were waiting for, without knowing they were waiting. What caused that situation? Literary talent and inspiration are, of course, among the requirements for lasting success in the world of fiction, but an author's responses to events and changing cultural values are also among those requirements. Further, writers don't just respond to changing cultural values, but they also help to shape them. In Tolkien's case, he was responding in part to the two world wars. Two of Tolkien's three closest friends died in World War I, and perhaps even more significant than their deaths was the way in which they died, without romance or glory, and without ever seeing the men who killed them. This impersonal element led to a paradox. On the one hand, more and more people were being required to behave heroically. On the other hand, after all those impersonal and mechanical deaths, it was no longer possible to believe in the traditional images of heroism, brave charges, and gallant stands. This dominant mood was expressed in a post-1918 war memoir by the novelist Robert Graves, which he titled Goodbye to All That. And obviously he means goodbye to all that heroism tradition that is gone forever. After 1918, traditional heroism seemed to be impossible. The most common reaction was cynicism, as with Graves, but what those who were not cynics were waiting for. Whether they knew it or not, they were waiting for an image of a new style of heroism that they could believe in and not feel cynical about. That's what Tolkien provided with the Hobbits. Now we'll start, before we move on to talk more about Frodo, we will talk a little bit about his uncle Bilbo, because the new heroic style started with Bilbo. In the early stages of Tolkien's novel The Hobbit, Bilbo is anything but a hero compared with the fierce dwarves. In fact, Bilbo does the worst thing a creature can do in the old heroic world. He loses self-control. When Thorin tries to recruit him for an expedition to kill the dragon Smaug, Bilbo shrieks and falls down, shaking like a jelly. Right from the start, on an old heroic scale of 1 to 10, Bilbo is a definite 0. But throughout the book, he rises steadily up the scale with perhaps 5 main turning points. Now, the first turning point was when Bilbo becomes separated from the dwarves as they try to make their escape from the goblins. He comes to a goblin tunnel, he draws his elvish blade, finds it comforting, and goes on to meet the strange creature Gollum. He wins a riddle contest with him and makes his own escape. Bilbo takes another step when he has just made up his mind that it is his duty, having escaped from the tunnels, to go back and look for the dwarves, when he overhears the dwarves deciding to leave him in the tunnels. At this moment, Bilbo for the first time is definitely ahead of the dwarves when it comes to courage. More clearly marked is the moment when Bilbo wakes up to find himself being attacked by a giant spider and manages to kill it. He feels a different person, enough of an old-style hero by this time to give his sword a name, Sting. But Bilbo's peak of courage comes later in the story when he conquers his own fear and goes down the tunnel to the cave of Smaug to steal the cup. Now the final step up the heroic scale for Bilbo comes when he creeps away from the dwarves and hands over the priceless Arkenstone jewel to Bard and the Elven King for them to use as a bargaining point against the dwarves. This is courage of a different kind because it could be seen as dishonorable, even treacherous. Bilbo's heroism is different from traditional saga-style heroism in important ways. First, none of his 5 main turning points, except the last to some extent, is recognized by the outside world. They all take place when Bilbo is alone, and most of them when he is in the dark. His courage is shown in conquering his own fear. Further, Bilbo's decision concerning the Arkenstone represents moral courage, doing what many would call wrong and accepting the risk of blame. Both styles of courage seem especially relevant to the modern world. And now we will move to Frodo's heroism, which is the main topic of our episode. Now, Frodo too starts off fairly low on the scale of heroism. When Gandalf first explains to him about the ring and the danger it creates, his response is, "I wish it need not have happened in my time." For those of Tolkien's generation, that phrase was reminiscent of Neville Chamberlain's claim that the agreement he made with Hitler in 1938 had brought peace in our time. The words "in our time" or "in my time" were associated with appeasement and shirking one's duty. Like Bilbo, Frodo improves slowly. His first real step up the scale comes at the end of the Council of Elrond. None of the leaders of Middle-earth can decide what to do about destroying the ring, though they all agree that it must be done, and it must be done by taking it to the heart of the Dark Lord's realm of Mordor. Faced with this task, everyone falls silent. Then Frodo stands up, filled with dread, and says, "I will take the ring, though I do not know the way." Unlike Bilbo, Frodo is not on his own, and he's not in the dark, but he shows a similar kind of understated courage. What Frodo must overcome is his own fear, and he gets no help in doing so. And that continues to be his style. He plugs through the dead marshes, around the Black Gate, past Shelob the Spider, and into Mordor itself. In addition to his own fear, Frodo must also overcome temptation. He is offered repeated opportunities to avoid his duty, to hand over the ring or use it himself. He and Sam are also tempted in the Land of Shadow to do the expedient thing and kill Gollum. They have every excuse for doing so because Gollum would not hesitate to kill them if he got the chance, and especially if he could get back the ring. But another lesson learned in Tolkien's time was that just because the other side does something, it does not mean you should do it too. Frodo and Sam feel pity for Gollum and they spare him, as Bilbo did in The Hobbit. The hobbits are big enough, spiritually, not physically, not to take advantage. Ironically, pity for Gollum is vital because Frodo fails at the last temptation and chooses not to destroy the ring. It is Gollum in the end who destroys it. It is striking that after achieving his quest, which makes him, in a way, the major hero of The Lord of the Rings, Frodo increasingly fades out. He plays very little part in the liberation of the Shire. And of course, for those who know the story of The Lord of the Rings just from Peter Jackson's movie, this part is not mentioned because it's not actually a part of The Lord of the Rings itself. It happens after the events of The Lord of the Rings. Nevertheless, some men and some hobbits collaborators tried to take over the Shire, and in the liberation of the Shire, Frodo plays very little part. Now, back home, his deeds aren't recognized. He never really recovers from the physical and mental wounds he has suffered, and Sam is pained to discover how little respect he gets. Frodo receives the kind of treatment that our own veterans have often received, not much in the way of thanks, honor, or rehabilitation. That's part of the modern heroic style as well. Heroism is lonely while you're doing it and unrecognized once it's over. But that just makes it more heroic because there's nothing to keep you at your duty except your own sense of duty. Tolkien created characters who expressed the feelings and experiences of the men and women of the last century's citizen armies. They were not professionals and not necessarily volunteers, yet they were often called on to perform tasks that the warrior elites of the past would have regarded as impossibly brave. So, that was about Frodo Baggins, our hero for today. We will talk more about other heroes like Odysseus, Sherlock Holmes, and other heroes, and we will talk about what makes those heroes special. So stay tuned because more will come your way in Heroes series from English Plus Podcast. Remember that you can find the transcript of the episode in the link you have in the description, and you will also find a quiz in the description that will check your understanding of what we talked about here today. It will be fun, I promise, nothing difficult and challenging. It's just for fun and to make sure that you were following what I was saying here in this episode. So thank you very much for listening to another episode from English Plus Podcast. Don't forget to share the episode with your friends and support us if you can on Patreon to keep our free e-learning journey alive. This was Danny, your host, and I will see you next time.